Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the healthiest half hour anywhere online today. We appreciate you joining us right here on Facebook and on YouTube as we attempt to raise our nutrition IQs together. And joining us today with some knowledge to help us raise those IQs is Dr. Neal Barnard. We're going to be opening up the doctor's mailbag and answering your questions, including how many calories should you be eating every day? He's got the answer to that. Plus, we're going to help out a nurse who works the overnight shift and is wondering what's the healthiest way to eat if your schedule is a little bit wonky. Then we're going to talk about nuts and how much you should be eating those every day. What's the limit there? And a whole lot more. So let's go ahead and dive right into the doctor's mailbag right now and welcome Dr. Neal Barnard to the Exam Room Live. Dr. Barnard, thanks so much for joining us today, my friend.
Hi there, Chuck. Good to talk to you today.
And if you have a question for Dr. Barnard, go ahead and submit that right now. You can put it in the comments or the chat box, or you can even tweet it to us using that hashtag Exam Room Live. Send that on over to me at Chuck Carroll, WLC, or at PCRM, and we will get to as many questions as we possibly can before the end of the show. But Dr. Barnard, I want to start with the top question of the day, and it comes to us from a viewer on Instagram wondering how many calories they should be eating in a day.
Oh, first of all, let me praise you for your sophistication, because most people don't even think about things like that. And so you're going in straight into the details. Most people consume, at least in America, somewhere in the range of 1,800 to 2,000 calories in a day. However, let me encourage you not to strive for a particular goal, because it really depends, first of all, on how big you are. A bigger person needs more calories, and also how active you are. If you're running a marathon, you're going to be burning twice as many calories or more compared with if you were sedentary. So the rule of thumb, of course, is if you're eating a healthy plant-based diet, then the normal homeostasis mechanisms kick in, meaning your body senses that it needs more calories, it makes you hungry, you eat more food. And where the system fails is with overly calorically dense foods, fatty foods. Animal products have no fiber, so they kind of defy the system. But if you're eating normal, high fiber, plant-based foods, the system works out pretty well, even if you don't count calories.
Well, let's go ahead and flip that question over on its head, because we have a great follow-up here from Jana. She wants to know, how many calories should a person eat if they're underweight? Do the same principles apply there?
Yeah, the same principles do apply. So you'll want to be eating vegetables and fruits, whole grains and beans. And if you eat a normal amount of them and you're not restricting at all, in other words, you're not trying to lose weight. Here I'm thinking about certain eating disorders where people are restricting to keep their weight down out of fear of excessive weight gain and that kind of thing. But assuming that's not you, your normal hunger drive will bring you up to where you should be. And you might be thinking, well, am I underweight or am I not? Go online and search for a BMI calculator, your body mass index. It's not perfect, but it's a pretty good way of gauging if your weight is where it should be. And so on a BMI calculator, you plug in your height and you plug in your weight, and it'll say what your body mass index is. And if it's between 18.5 and 25, that's the weight range where you're going to be in pretty good shape with regard to long-term likelihood of staying healthy. So that's really where you want to be. Now, implicit in your question is, I'm trying to gain more weight. And what you will discover is if there is more fat in your diet, even if it's extra virgin olive oil or less healthy kinds of fats, the fats are the ones that are going to cause the weight gain the most rapidly. So nuts and seeds and guacamole are the things that tend to fatten people up. Before you jump in, though, and think, hooray, that's what I'm going to do, and I'll eat these foods, I'll gain weight, the weight might come on where you don't especially want it, as opposed to being an even kind of weight gain. So the basic rule of thumb, eat when you're hungry, stop eating when you're full. And if everything you're eating is beans, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, your weight will take care of itself.
I think that we're on a roll here with these kinds of questions. Vicky here, you mentioned nuts, and then she just, matter of fact, popped in. She wants to know, she's watching us on Instagram. Is there a limit to the amount of nuts that we should be eating in a day in terms of saturated fat?
Yeah, 37.5 nuts per day. Okay, I'm sorry. Just I'm playing with you, Chuck. Okay, nuts. Luckily, most nuts they do have a more fat in them than say vegetables or fruit. So we limit nuts particularly for people who are trying to reverse their diabetes or lose weight. And the reason is, as you know, with diabetes, we want to get the fat out of the muscle and liver cells. When you do that, insulin sensitivity comes back. If you pack fat into those cells, your insulin sensitivity is harmed. And so for those folks who are struggling with diabetes, we keep the nuts and things out of the diet. And obviously all the animal products go too. For people who are trying to lose weight, they'll discover that going vegan is great, but they'll want to also keep the nuts and the guacamole and the oils in general to a bare minimum. Now, let's say you don't have diabetes, you're young and you're reasonably thin and you're feeling okay. How much can you do nut-wise? I'll tell you, I think there's sort of a good rule of thumb, a little arbitrary, but not bad. And that's maybe about an ounce per day of nuts. What is an ounce? An ounce is the palm of your hand before you reach the fingers. So you pour the almonds, walnuts, cashews into the palm of your hand. Once it hits your fingers, stop. And then the next suggestion is don't eat that. Because if you do, you'll fill your hand again, and nuts are kind of addicting. So instead of eating it, crumble it up and put it on your oatmeal or put it on your salad and use nuts as a flavoring or as an ingredient. And that way you'll get the vitamin E that they have. That's good, without being so likely to overdose on them, which will happen if you're using them as a snack food on their own. So I would say for a healthy person who's not trying to reverse diabetes or lose weight, an ounce a day is not a bad thing.
Oh, man, but I'm telling you, nuts can be a dangerous thing in my house, especially the dry roasted, unsalted, plain old fashioned peanut.
Yeah.
I love those things, and it's so hard to limit it to just 1 ounce a day. What tips do you have?
You said it. You said it. And the smokehouse people, they have figured out how to drive, people's nut desires into the stratosphere. So yeah, you got to be super careful with those things.
Man, it's a real thing. Before we get to this next question, Dr. Barnard, I just want to take a second to say thank you to Jessie. This is Jessie's question, and the work that she's doing right now as an ICU nurse is more important than ever. So Jessie, thank you so very much for what it is that you're doing, and thank you very much for joining us here today. With that said, her question is there an optimal way to eat if I'm working overnight? My schedule is 7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me echo what Chuck just said. Is thank you for doing that work that you're doing. It really depends a little bit on if this is a one-time thing where you work weekend nights and the rest of the time you're on days, or if you're on permanent nights. The reason that I make a distinction is if you're on permanent nights, you're going to really want to adjust your schedule. So it's just like a day job, only it happens when it's dark outside. So you've got to pick times to eat that are regular for you. If it's an unusual kind of thing for you where it's just every other weekend or something like that, you might find it most easy to stay to your daytime schedule, stick with it that way, and just get through the night as best you can without regard to trying to change your diurnal rhythm for such a short period of time.
Question now from Elliot, wondering about the magic of cholesterol. Stay with me here. Here it goes. His question is, I know a very low-fat vegan diet can unclog arteries, but where does that cholesterol go once it's cleaned out? It's pulling a Houdini here.
So what did your body do with all the cholesterol that it's removing? Okay, this will not be on the test. But what your body does is it finds cholesterol particles and it removes them and it carries them off to be disposed, just like other things that are in your body. So your body has particles called lipoproteins that will carry cholesterol away and it will be disposed. It goes back to the liver and it's metabolized and reused. Cholesterol is a funny thing. It gets us into tremendous trouble if you got too much of it. It will lead to atherosclerosis. That means heart disease, means strokes, other problems. But at the same time, cholesterol is used by your body to make hormones, cell membranes, makes vitamin D out of cholesterol. So your body will take that cholesterol and use it for what it's intended for, as opposed to the things where it'll cause problems.
Next question comes to us from LJ. I'm sorry, we're going to go to Candace here. Is keto a healthy way to lose weight with diabetes? If not, what diet is?
Okay, a healthy diet for diabetes is a low-fat, completely plant-based diet. And as we've described on this show and on other podcasts that Chuck and I have done together, what you're doing with a vegan diet, meaning no animal products, is you're eliminating all of the animal fat, and that along with keeping vegetable oils really low, does something in your body that other diets don't do. It starts to remove the fat that's been building up in your muscle and liver cells. And that fat in your muscle and liver cells is what causes your body to not respond well to insulin. Get that fat out, and your body responds better, and sometimes diabetes even goes away. Now, ketogenic diets, they're popular for people for a few weeks, and then they get frustrated with them in many cases, and they abandon them. And abandoning them is a good thing. We don't recommend ketogenic diets at all. And here's why. They're based on this idea that if you take out virtually all of the carbohydrate from your diet, so you're not eating any fruit anymore, you're not eating beans, you're not eating whole grains, you're not eating any starchy vegetables, you're going to lose weight is the theory. And that's true because most of what you eat are the things I just mentioned, and they're gone. So you tend to lose weight. And if you're not presenting any normal glucose to your body starts to make something called ketones that seem to reduce the appetite, swell. So people who do this over the short run, they tend to lose some weight. Over the long run, they don't actually lose any more weight than other diets. And here's what's bad, is that over the long run, there's something that seems to change on a more ongoing basis. And that's that your cholesterol level gets worse. Specifically, LDL cholesterol or bad cholesterol tends to go up with these diets. You don't want that. If you've got diabetes, this is going to sound a little bit harsh, but how diabetes kills a person, it's not through a high blood sugar usually. It's by cardiovascular disease. So it increases the risk of a heart attack or increases the risk of a stroke or of kidney damage by affecting the arteries. You don't want to have your cholesterol level rise. That's exactly the opposite of what you want, and that's what these diets unfortunately often do. And even looking out at 12 months, 24 months on these diets, the cholesterol levels stay high for many, many people. So don't go near a ketogenic diet would be my suggestion. Instead, go to a healthy plant-based diet, and you'll see lots and lots of resources on how to do that at pcrm.org.
Great response there. And in it, you mentioned two things that Debbie is wondering about: diabetes and starchy food. She writes, I am a type 2 diabetic, and I'm feeling like I'm brainwashed not to eat these starchy foods. Are they okay?
Yes, they are okay. There are healthy starchy foods, and there are some that are not so healthy, but in the healthy category, beans, typical starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes and things are fine. Now, there are a starchy donut, not your best choice. But grains and beans and vegetables and fruits are the foods that you want to eat. How do we know that? Back almost 20 years ago, the National Institutes of Health funded our research team here at the Physicians Committee to do a head-to-head test of a healthy, low-fat vegan diet, comparing that to a more conventional diabetes diet for people who had type 2 diabetes. And the vegan diet was dramatically better. Why? Because type 2 diabetes starts as fat builds up in the liver cells and in the muscle cells. That stops your insulin from working. We didn't know that back a generation ago. We thought, well, gee, maybe I'm eating too much sugar, maybe that's what caused it. No, the problem is that the fat builds up inside the cells, and as it builds up, the insulin doesn't work anymore. So on a vegan diet, how much animal fat is there? There's none. And if you keep the oils low, you get your insulin sensitivity back. It's the best way to go. And as a bonus, it's also the way to baby your arteries. So whether it's the big arteries to your heart, the arteries to your kidneys, the arteries to the brain, or think about those tiny little blood vessels in the back of your eye, or the tiny little blood vessels in the kidneys. You want to baby those blood vessels. And a vegan diet doesn't have any cholesterol in it. It doesn't have any animal fat in it. And with this, a person with type 2 diabetes can A, live a normal life, and B, dramatically reduce the likelihood that their life would ever be cut short by any of these complications.
All right, now let's get to LJ's question. She is saying menopause and a vegan diet. What should or shouldn't a menopausal woman be eating?
Okay, if you don't mind, at the risk of sounding a little self-promotional, I wrote a book on this topic called Your Body in Balance. And the reason that I wrote Your Body in Balance is because I was struck by the fact that hormonal conditions are everywhere. We've been talking about one, diabetes. The insulin hormone is not doing its thing. In menopause, if you got hot flashes, what does that mean? That means that the ovaries, which used to be producing estrogens, have gone on strike, basically, or they've retired. And so your amount of estrogen is falling and you're having the results of it. So what happens? Multiple times throughout the day, the blood vessels in your skin suddenly widen out. It's called vasodilation. And that's just like a radiator being opened up. And so you feel as hot on the outside as you are inside, your core temperature. That's a hot flash. Doesn't last too long, but when it's done, then you've got chills. And if it happens at night, it's going to disrupt your sleep. And you're going to think, this is just horrible. Will this ever end? There are a couple of things to think about here. And you'll see more about this in Your Body in Balance if you'd like to have a look at it. Thing one, a researcher from Canada years ago went to Japan and started interviewing Japanese women. Their diet was not completely vegan, but it was, at that time, very predominantly plant-based. Lots of rice, lots of vegetables, not much meat, really no cheese or ice cream to speak of. And they really didn't have hot flashes. Other countries, China, rural Mexico, where the diet was mostly plant-based, relatively little hot flashes, but if they would westernize, bring in the steak, bring in the chicken, bring in the cheese, the hot flashes would start to come in. So there's something about a plant-based diet that seems to help. Second thing, soybeans. When women consume a fair amount of soybeans, it turns out that hot flashes are helped as well. It doesn't seem to help everybody, but it helps a lot of people. So we have actually recently been putting this to the test in a randomized trial here at the Physicians Committee. If you would like to try to do the same, 3 steps. Number 1, no animal products. And just try, if this is new for you, don't make a long-term commitment. Just do it for 2-3 months, say 8, 12 weeks. No animal products. Keep oils really low and have about a half a cup of cooked soybeans every day. That's not a lot. Pressure cook them on a Sunday, portion them out in little like individual Ziploc bags and have about a half cup each day, and just track your hot flashes as the days go by. If you want to, you can, after you cook them, you can roast them. Throw them in the oven and a baking sheet lined with parchment, 350 degrees for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that, and just use them as your snack food. The combination of a plant-based diet and the added soybeans for many women seems to help their hot flashes enormously. And if you give it a try, let us know how it goes.
Next question is, I think it's a clever way to ask probably the question that vegans get asked more than any other. Exam Roomie watching us right now on YouTube writes, I've heard that even though plants have all the essential amino acids, they aren't as bioavailable as animal protein. Is that true? And if so, is it something that vegans should be concerned about?
Okay, well, thank you for asking that. It's not something to think about at all. It's not a problem at all. But for people who don't know what we're talking about, proteins in your body, whether they're the proteins that make up your skin or the proteins that make up your muscles or the proteins that are used to make hormones, all proteins are built from what are called amino acids. Those are the building blocks. They're kind of like individual beads that join together to make a necklace, and that necklace is the protein chain. Now, you need the right number of beads, and you need all the right variety of them, and some of them are called essential amino acids. Here's the point. Plants have all the essential amino acids. Now, you'll see a little bit different makeup in, say, rice compared to beans, compared to broccoli, but most plants have all of the essential amino acids, and a healthy plant-based diet of even a minimal variety of plant foods brings all of them to you. So no, it's not something to think about at all. Most people get far more protein than they need, and you are not going to run protein deficient. If you're eating just a normal amount of food and it's a variety of plant-based foods, don't worry about it. Not a problem.
You know what, Dr. Barnard? We might have a professional athlete with us here today. William on Instagram sent in a question wanting to know, should professional cyclists take iron supplements?
Oh, neat question. Good to hear from you, William. No, I wouldn't take iron supplements unless your doctor recommends that you do. Now, but you're kind of thinking right, that athletes often do run low in iron compared to other people. And you'll see this, let's say a woman is now running, she's training for marathons and whatever, and she's running low, and her doctor says, good heavens, we're going to put you on an iron supplement. The reason I don't recommend iron supplementation for anyone as a routine without testing is because iron is toxic. Iron increases the risk of heart problems. It increases the risk of brain disease, or it's associated with Alzheimer's disease. So like a lot of other metals, copper is another one, zinc is another one, your body wants a little bit, but it does not want too much. What do? If you see your doctor and your doctor says you are anemic, you're not making enough red blood cells, the doctor has to learn why. And the doctor will do some pretty easy tests typically to discover the source. And if you happen to be low in iron, then the doctor will talk about eating the right foods like green leafy vegetables and beans to make sure you're getting adequate iron. Now, if you're a man and you're not having any monthly menstrual blood loss, obviously, the likelihood of being iron deficient really pretty low. For women, a little bit higher. But nobody really should be supplementing iron unless the doctor says you actually need to supplement because you're low, because the risks outweigh the benefit.
All right, really quick before we get to this next question, yes or no, you need some fat in your diet?
Yes, you do.
Okay, then this question from Dino is an interesting one. Wants to know, is it healthy to eat a zero added fat diet?
Okay, well now added fat is different from sort of the intrinsic fats. If you take a sprig of broccoli, send it to a lab, and you wouldn't think there's any fat on there, and you didn't add any. You didn't all butter up your broccoli before sending it to the lab, but they're going to tell you, you know what? That broccoli is maybe 7 or 8% fat as a percentage of its calories. There are intrinsic fats in broccoli and spinach and all the green leafy vegetables. There are traces of them in beans, traces of them in whole grains, even brown rice, about maybe 5% fat as a percentage of its calories. What's that fat? The alpha-linolenic acid, that is the sort of the fundamental omega-3, is found in those green leafy vegetables. There's not a lot, but proportionate to the total fat content of those foods, it's a substantial proportion, and so that's fine. But you asked about added fats, so that's drizzling the olive oil on your bread or something like that. No, there's no need for that at all.
Okay, so zero added fat diet. Let's ask about another interesting diet. This one comes from Bill, wanting to know whether or not there are any dangers to your health if you eat a predominantly raw diet. You still include some cooked foods, especially starchy foods, but still a predominantly raw diet. He wants to know whether or not that's a healthy decision.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to explore, and let me plead a little bit of ignorance here because I don't think we know the exact right answer on this, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I am quite convinced that we didn't evolve along with sterno on the planet. In other words, we weren't cooking foods until in the kind of historically, relatively recently. Obviously, people have been cooking for a very long period of time, but the other great apes, the other animals don't cook food, and we didn't either early in our evolution. And so you would think, well, we ought to do well on raw foods, and true enough. But the problem is I don't know which those foods are. If you look at the foods, say, that our cousins eat, chimpanzees or gorillas, they're quite different from the foods that are available to you in Omaha. We presumably started out our sojourn on Earth in Africa, probably Eastern Africa. And if you look at the foods that people might be eating in, say, North America, they're different foods. Take a tomato, take a peanut. These are foods that are North American foods, Central American foods. They're not African foods at all. So yes, I think raw food is a good idea, but I have to confess I don't know which foods they really are. But you can certainly explore them. You can add them to your diet. And the one thing I would encourage you to do is to still continue to make sure you get good, complete nutrition. Have a variety of foods, eat enough foods to make sure you can maintain your weight, and do take supplemental vitamin B12. You need it for healthy nerves and healthy blood, and you're not going to get it if you're not supplementing it or having fortified foods. And, we can go on from there with other steps, but those are the main things.
Let's go ahead and take that question about the raw diet. Do a 180 on this one as well. We have a follow-up from someone wondering whether an exclusively cooked diet is a healthy option.
Yeah, you can do fine that way. And for some people in some extremes on the planet, it's going to be pretty hard for them to get fresh foods. But to tell you the truth, I suggest that the more you do have uncooked raw foods in your diet, I'm talking about leafy greens and fruits and so forth, I think that's really a good thing and not something you would want to omit. But there are people who live a long time, much of their life without having much in the way of raw foods, and they generally do well. Rules still apply. Vegan, minimize the fats. Don't forget your B12.
And we have time for a few more questions. So if there's something on your mind that you would like to ask Dr. Barnard, go ahead and post that in the comments or the chat box. And again, tweet it to us using that hashtag #ExamRoomLive. Here's another popular question. This is from someone wondering whether it's possible to take too much B12.
Maybe. Great question. And that's really a very current question. If you had asked me that 2 years ago, I would have said, nah, B12, if you have too much B12, you just excrete the excess, no problem. That may be true. But after, when was this? Maybe about 18 months ago, something like that. A paper came out looking at people over the long run who had extra high B12 levels. And they didn't seem to do so well. They had higher mortality compared to other people. So it may well be that B12 is like so many other vitamins where you need a certain amount. Not much, you need a certain amount, but you don't need a huge amount. So what does that mean in practical terms? The recommended daily allowance is 2.4 micrograms per day for adults. And so you go to the store and you think, gee, I can't find anything here that's small. The multiple vitamins are pretty small, but all of the B12 supplements are 200 or 500 or 1,000 micrograms a day. 1,000 is really too much unless you have a specific medical condition where you can't absorb B12. That's what those are for. There is some room for error because your body's absorption of it is going to be limited. But what I would suggest you do is to take about 100 micrograms a day, have that be your dose. And if you went to the store and you picked up something that's got 5,000 micrograms a day, micrograms in a pill, have that eat maybe every other day, every third day, until the bottle runs out, and then go back and get a small one. Don't have that much every day on an ongoing basis. We will be smarter about this in 2 or 3 years, but for now, it looks like it's essential to get the amount you need. I would not really overdo it.
It's kind of in the same supplement type of question here. This person is wondering whether it's better to buy soy milk that's been fortified with calcium versus the non-fortified soy milk. What would your suggestion be?
You can. And calcium is something we all need in our diets. And green leafy vegetables are of course, nature's source. In fact, that's where cows get their calcium. They're eating grass and so forth. But hopefully we're not eating grass, but we're eating broccoli and kale and collards. And if you're eating lots of that and beans and other high calcium foods, you're going to do fine. But if you want to have supplemental calcium, the supplement that's added to soy milk is fine. And there's one thing I like about it is that it comes with your meal. It's built into the meal. If you take a calcium supplement between meals, it seems to be associated with increased risk of kidney stones. If you take the calcium supplement with meals, it seems not to be. So I've been a big believer in having your supplements with the meal. Why? Because then it adds to the other nutrients that are there as opposed to giving your body a huge wave of that nutrient all at one time.
All right, we're going to take 2 more, and let's go back to the iron thing. We tackled it from one approach earlier in the show, but now let's look at iron from another perspective. Millions of kitchens across the world have cast iron pans in them, and someone is wondering whether or not a cast iron skillet is healthy, or should they get rid of it?
No, don't get rid of it. What you should do is take that cast iron pan and think fondly of your grandma who gave that to you because this was her pan, and take it and put a nail in your wall and hang it up there and remember her every time you see it. Don't cook with it. And because if you do cook with it, the foods absorb the iron And if you are a woman in your reproductive years, you'll have a certain amount of iron loss every month that will help you get rid of it. But if you're not in your reproductive years anymore, or if you're a man, you're accumulating excess iron from the pan, and that's going to increase your risk of Alzheimer's disease and heart disease, according to the best research that we have. If you use a cast iron pan once a month, probably no big deal. But if it's your go-to pan every day, you're getting more iron than you really want to be having.
And let's wrap things up with one of my favorite questions. This one comes to us from Anjali. Wants to know whether frozen fruits and vegetables have as many nutrients as fresh ones.
Yeah, they sure do. Now, when you go to the store, you look at the fresh produce, and it is gorgeous and beautiful, and you think there can't be anything more nutritious. And, that's true. But if you're buying frozen and you're thinking, well, this is so much more convenient for me, I can keep it in my freezer for a long period of time, and I'll use a little bit, and it's not going to go like my rubbery broccoli or rubbery spinach or something where you couldn't use the fresh up the right time frame. Don't feel bad about using the frozen, because what do they do to give you frozen vegetables? They harvest them, they freeze them. There's not a big delay. If you're getting fresh, sure, it's fresh, but it came from the fields into a truck, into a warehouse, and finally got into the store. So there's a longer delay, and there's more loss of nutrients in the process. So fresh and frozen should really be thought of as nutritionally equivalent.
And the producer tells me that we still have a lot of good questions coming in. So here's what's going to happen. If we didn't get an opportunity to answer yours on the show today, we are going to save it and do our best to get you an answer on an upcoming episode. You have my word on that. So keep on posting your questions in the comments and the chat box, and we will do our best to get you an answer when we open up the doctor's mailbag once again. And a quick scheduling note here. You may have noticed since the new year began, we're not doing live shows every single day now. So here's what the deal is. We're doing shows Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, with the exception of this week, which is a little bit weird because of the inauguration. So we will be doing live shows every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So make sure that you join us right here on Facebook and on YouTube for those. And of course, brand new episodes of the Exam Room podcast are out every Tuesday and Thursday, and every Tuesday indeed includes today. And that is when we revisit the conversation with Dr. Will Bolsowitz, where we will opened up the doctor's mailbag with him, answered a whole lot of gut health questions, including how to deal with gas when you're first adopting that plant-based diet. All right. Nobody wants to clear a room, and Dr. Bolsowitz has tips for how you can avoid doing that. So all you need to do to get in on the fun is head over to Apple Podcast or Spotify, wherever shows are available. Hit that subscribe button when you look for the Exam Room podcast by the Physicians Committee. And if you would be so kind, please also leave a 5-star rating. And coming up on Friday's show back here on Facebook and YouTube, I'm going to be joined by dietitian Lee Crosby, and she has 10 things you need to know about going vegan. So that is at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Go ahead and like us on Facebook or subscribe to this channel right now on YouTube. Set a reminder so you can join us then. But for today, that is all the time that we have, my friends. I want to say thank you one more time to Dr. Neal Barnard for helping us raise our nutrition IQs, and to the crew behind the scenes that makes the magic happen. Thank you as always. And to you, my exam roomies, appreciate you being here as well. For everyone at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Talk to you again on Friday. But until then, stay safe, take a stand, and keep it plant-based.